What to do, YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the Longest Yard soundtrack. Basically, this is the soundtrack to the Longest Yard movie that came out in 2005, which was an Adam Sandler and Chris Rock movie. Nelly was also in this movie, and he contributed some songs to this soundtrack, which was pretty good. This is definitely a good highlight for him. It was kind of like an interim between like his Sweat and Suit albums from 2004 to his Sweatsuit kind of compilation album from 2005 when he dropped Grills and some of that type of stuff. So this is like an extra taste of Nelly around this time, kind of doing a similar lead single kind of kickoff like Eminem did for 8 Mile and that type of stuff. So this is basically a Nelly fest in some ways, but there is quite a bit of star-studdedness on here. There's definitely some good ones. D12 and Eminem are on here. T.I. has a solo song on here. Lil Wayne has a solo song on here. Murphy Lee, who kind of was starting to get kind of phasing out in like the kind of mainstream appeal, has a song on here. Akon has a song on here. Dub C has a song on here. Chamillionaire has a song on here before he dropped like his first official album. There's a good assortment of stuff on here. Trillville, people like that. So there's just some good ones. Definitely a pretty budgeted project. And the thing about it is Adam Sandler kind of executive produced this album, which I didn't know. So he did the movie and this. This is actually a pretty good taste of like kind of an amalgamation of Southern hip hop, but also kind of lighter in a more kind of mainstream sense, where a lot of these folks, it's not so much in an underground sense, but just kind of burgeoning Southern rappers that were on the verge, or were either in the process of blowing up in 2005 or were kind of getting ready to. It's kind of somewhere in that context as far as that's concerned. I mean, Paul Wall's not on here yet, and like I'm trying to think of some other ones, like Juvenile's not on here, and like Mike Jones isn't on here, and some of those type folks. Bun B is not on here, but it's kind of interesting just in the concept of some of the folks that are on here, just because this was a pretty solid movie. I do recommend checking out The Longest Yard movie with Adam Sandler. I mean, it came out some time ago. It's kind of funny. It's not as funny as like Adam Sandler's true heaviest hit movies, like Happy Gilmore, Billy Madison, The Waterboy, some of those type ones, The Wedding Singer, some of those type ones, but it does have its quality. It's definitely a highlighted hit, and it just kind of has that feel. Nelly did a good job in that movie. So this album kind of has some hit singles on here. For the most part, the big names are the ones with the best songs. There's not really any surprising kind of low-key ones that kind of turn up, like, not to name names, but just to kind of say that for the most part, you know, thinking about going straight for the D12 song, which does have Eminem on there, is a good look, just because it is a pretty hit song, and the Nelly songs are obviously good highlights. T.I. did a great job, so there's just some good ones, or if you see the artist that you like and you know that if you expect them to kind of have a hit song, for the most part, most of the big name artists kind of deliver on here. That's just kind of the aspect. I do like the fact that this is kind of like a taste, and these are kind of like secret songs of folks. It's not too often that I really see Lil Wayne on like movie soundtracks. That doesn't really happen that much, especially not in the 2010s for it. I can't think of too many times that Lil Wayne was on like a 2010s movie soundtrack, and he really wasn't that much in the 2000s era either. T.I. doesn't do it too often. I want to say that there was almost like an ATL movie soundtrack, but then I think that was actually just the King album that T.I. kind of did. So that's this kind of thing. But Nelly kind of did this. He has some flagship songs on here, and it's kind of like the last song with D12 on it that has Proof on there. So this is the last song that D12 did in Proof's lifetime, and it's the last song of like the full 6-group set that they had up to that point. So this is kind of a secret. In some cases, you should just get this project just for the D12 song with all 6 members. Get it for the Nelly songs, of course, and just overall other good hits. Akon has a pretty good hit song. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about the 2 singles. Like, both of the singles had Nelly on there. Erd Time was a pretty good smash. This was a decent little hit back in 2005. I mean, Nelly was still kind of cresting off his Sweat and Suit albums from 2004, but this was a good look just to kind of have this as like a refreshing kind of game time type hit. So I'll go ahead and talk about that song a little bit more. So, yeah, Erd Time was the first single. This is kind of like a thunderous kind of Erd Time is like a really thunderous kind of outdoor fest kind of song. Has like some really nice effects in the song if you listen to it through headphones or something. It kind of has like these clicks in the song on your left and right earbuds that kind of happen and that type of stuff, or left and right speakers. This would have to say is some real good one. Just pretty much a sports game hit. If you're going to like a football or basketball game or baseball game or soccer game or something like that, it's just an overall nice hit to kind of hear in some of those places, to go out and about and just enjoy sports and some of that type of stuff. Just a real summer, nice early summer kind of energy. I don't see this as like being July, August as much, but I think it's just kind of like April, May, June. I mean, in some cases, because this album and movie portrays the concept of football. I mean, I guess you could see it as kind of being like September, October, August kind of weather music also, but this is kind of definitely warm weather type feel. This is great for being at sports games and kind of vibing and fraternizing out and about in those kind of situations. So it's just a great hit single. Nelly does a good job with it, and he brings some extra cats on here. Jung True and King Jacob. King Jacob is also on the Murphy Lee song, and it's pretty good. This has real kind of commanding energy. The second single is Fly Away, and this one isn't talked about as much. Wikipedia doesn't really signify that it was a single, but I think it was released to radio. It's just kind of a more mellow and low-key kind of song. Didn't quite chart as high. It was just it's kind of an overlooked song by Nelly as I look after. This is kind of a different one, and just kind of similar to like Eminem's 8 Mile. That was the second single off the 8 Mile soundtrack, where it just doesn't get talked about just because Lose Yourself was such a huge smash. It's kind of what happened with Fly Away, where the second single off of Longest Yard just didn't get quite the same attention, but it is a great song. It's a very kind of soul and song. This has like a good acoustic. This has like a good acoustic guitar and kind of soul and type beat on there. The soul and song about struggle and just overcoming prison sentences and just other struggles and that type of stuff. It's a nice change of pace from the rest of the album. I do like this kind of song. It's kind of a more bluesy and kind of glum type song, but I think Nelly really nails the vibe on this particular song. It's just in good orientation, where it could have been like another club hit or like a ladies hit or something like that, but it just goes for like a more ruminating and kind of like a glum kind of way type feel, and I think that really was nailed pretty well. So this one's kind of an overlooked song. I do recommend it. I mean, it's not hype and it doesn't really get you energized and exhilarated, but it is just a good kind of song to relate to and that type stuff. It's kind of the concept. So there are 13 songs on this album, and out of those 13, I wound up recommending to you 8. So I'm going to go ahead and recommend those 8 songs, and we'll talk about them. So those 8 songs would be Bounce Like This, So Fly, Time, My Balls, Talkin' That Talk, Shorty Bounce, Fly Away, and Stomp. So to talk about some of these immediate ones, like I feel like Bounce Like This is like a real quick highlight. This is definitely a nice breezy kind of summer bop of a song. This is by T.I. on here. It's just a very pimpish kind of song with some good gleam on there. This kind of feels like it could have been an extra song on like Urban Legend or something. It's kind of just a low-key kind of one. This kind of off the side because it's not every day that T.I. kind of pops up on a movie soundtrack, but it just has a powerful emphasis, and T.I. really does a great job with the lyrics. I mean, he just kind of shreds, T.I. kind of just shreds this song apart, and it's just interesting because the Dirty South kind of swag that he kind of has on this song is just kind of emphasized pretty well. I mean, T.I. was blossoming throughout 2005, and this is a good look and a good example of T.I. really continuing his reign throughout the mid-2000s and stuff. So it's just a very breezy and kind of boppish kind of summer tune. Another nice one is So Fly by Akon and Blues. So this is basically like another song. Akon's still kind of on his soulin' and glum type vibes, where Akon had just recently blown up from that point forward with Locked Up as one of his bigger songs around that time. But this is kind of like I feel like So Fly is very much a cousin of Locked Up, same type atmosphere and type vibes as that one. Very soul and kind of night bop, definitely one for stepping out at night and just kind of being more paranoid and stuff. I feel like it's very similar to Locked Up and just has some good melodies. Akon really does a good job with making this pretty melodic and just sings right through it, just with that sort of, you know, vivacious charm that was just like Locked Up in a lot of ways. So it's just another one. Blues does a pretty good job also. He replaces Styles P, but that's just kind of the concept as far as that kind of goes. So it's just another one. If you like Locked Up by Akon, you need another hit like that. It's just kind of a secret song by Akon because he doesn't have a ton of material out, so I definitely recommend So Fly. It's an overall good highlight for that. Probably could have been a single in some cases. And then to talk about My Balls, the last D12 song with the full D12 crew before Proof passed away. This is a real nice highlight. This one just kind of is very comical. This just feels like the vibes that they were on D12 World and that type of stuff, where they were just kind of more sardonic and kind of lackadaisical and that type of stuff. It seems like they were probably going to continue that concept had they been around in 2006 and 2007 like they were intending to. It's very much a sardonic and kind of this kind of flabbergasted kind of song. It's definitely a game time song. This one feels like it's in the midst of a football game. All 6 of the lyricists kind of depict that, and it's just kind of a decent party song. I can kind of see it as definitely a guys' night kind of song where you're just watching football and playing video games, that type of stuff, just having a good time, passing beers around, some of that type of stuff. Definite frat joint, fraternizing kind of joint. I think it's just an overall good one for that sort of concept. This kind of has those kind of testosterone kind of feels towards it. It's just an overall good one. Eminem is kind of, he's on his encore type vibes on here. He just kind of gallivants through this verse. I mean, his lyricism is on point, but it's just so lazy. It's just kind of in that same context that he was on Encore, where he just kind of just let syllables kind of roll off the tongue and they just managed to rhyme, but he wasn't really saying much. That's just kind of the concept. It's a good verse, but it just does not have like the sheer shredded energy that he did on Marshall Mathers LP and more Eminem show type vibes and that type of stuff. But it is just Encore era Eminem, where he just was just in his sleepwalking through some of these and just would tear them apart. So that's just kind of the thing. Talking That Talk is a nice one. Talking That Talk with Chameleonaire and David Banner is a nice one. This is like a minor crunk type song, definite hype type song on here. It's the sort of stuff. It's just interesting that Chameleonaire tried to pull off the vibes that Lil Jon was kind of doing, because Lil Jon is surprisingly not on this album. He probably would have been a nice fit for this. No beats by Lil Jon either. Trillville is on here. David Banner is on here. Folks like that did mess with Lil Jon, but he makes no appearances. And it's just too bad that he didn't, just because this is a crunk type song as far as that goes. Definitely has some Don't Push Me type vibes on there, but it just kind of feels like a minor kind of crunk song, and it does kind of get hyped in this that kind of edgy attitude that the Lil Jon type stuff usually does. Chameleonaire does a pretty good example of trying to do it, and then of course David Banner is pretty good at that style too. So it's just a good one if you want some of that kind of get out my face kind of energy as far as that kind of goes. Shawty Bounce by Lil Wayne is like a nice one. It's kind of a street bop, just talking about guns and AKs and that type of stuff throughout the song, or shotguns. Just an overall nice house party kind of dance bop, but it keeps its edge about it. So it can be kind of a song to kind of dance to and do like a nice G walk or something like that too, something in that context where the guys can dance to this one a little bit, but it just kind of has that street edge about it. So it's just kind of like a kind of house party type jam, but just kind of with the more edginess kind of sense, where Lil Wayne just kind of maintains that kind of street type feel towards it. It's kind of one of the more edgy songs on here, kind of similar to Talking That Talk, but it's kind of like Talking That Talk, but just less crunk oriented. So Lil Wayne has a nice edgy one. It's kind of surprising to kind of get Lil Wayne on those type vibes, because he was kind of a miss just having dropped the Carter, so he was kind of in between like the Carter 1 and the Carter 2, but this doesn't really feel like Carter 2 Lil Wayne. It just feels like leftover kind of spare vibes of Lil Wayne from like the Carter days. It's just an overall kind of, just kind of has like a kind of electronic almost sounding beat. Just really, Shawty Bounce just really feels like an electronic kind of house party type beat on there. It just really kind of has that electro kind of feel towards it. It's just kind of like a more mellow and sluggish version of Go DJ in that sort of context. That's just a nice one. And then Stomp with Murphy Lee, King Jacob, and Prentice Church. And then Stomp with Murphy Lee, King Jacob, and Prentice Church was kind of a similar song to Time by Nelly. Just has that same kind of vibe and like a sports game type feel towards it, but it's just a more low-key version of that. Just another kind of sports game outdoor kind of hit. Same kind of thumping and stomping and pounding kind of energy. It's the same context where I think that Time and Stomp would be a nice 1-2 punch for going out to sports games and kind of outdoor events and some of those type vibes, and just like the midst of like a warm kind of spring or summer kind of day and stuff. But this is kind of a more relaxed energy. Doesn't quite have the sprawling chorus of Time, but it does have just about maybe 1 or 2 notches of a little bit more mellow kind of turned energy compared to Time, but they're both just like great 2 songs to have for like great 1-2 kind of vibe for outdoor sports vibes to kind of get to. So this is just a nice one. Murphy Lee does a pretty good job, and it's kind of a forgotten thing, just thinking about the fact that Murphy Lee could shred these songs pretty well also, is the fact that he was pretty potent back in the 2000s, but he just disappeared pretty quickly and didn't manage to put out a second album for a while. So that's just kind of the thing, him kind of vanishing pretty quickly in the mid 2000s. That's a good song. It's a good surprise that he was on here. So I'm going to talk about the 5 songs I didn't enjoy. Most of these are just kind of on the more tip of just songs that were just lesser known artists. Like I didn't really like Infiltrate. That beat was just kind of like a plodding kind of beat. This kind of more of like a thumper that just didn't quite work as well. I mean, Trillville normally does like crunk type stuff, and it's just strange kind of getting them on like a more Southern Fried type cut, just kind of in like a more gangster rap type feel, when this album was kind of more in like a sports sense. And I mean, it's trying to maintain the edge, but this was just an example one that just didn't match up with the rest of the album. Kind of had Trillville out of context, and it just didn't work quite well for them. They should have just had like another Lil Jon type crunk number, like just Get Out My Face or something like that, but it just didn't quite deliver on that tip. And I feel like That's on My Mama was just kind of a poor beat on here. Nelly kind of tried to back him up in the chorus, but this production was just not good enough. I don't know if this tailor-made dude ever really stuck around past this song. It's kind of the same thing with You Should Know. This is just kind of a random one that just didn't quite hit as hard by 216. So I mean, it just didn't quite have the energy and the commanding presence of some of these other songs by the bigger names. I mean, sometimes when you get these artists on here that don't really have like any acclaim to them and are just one shot where you just really can't find any other music ever by them apart from like the one song that they have on like the movie soundtrack, it's just kind of difficult to support some of those folks. The Alley and Gip song just didn't quite do it as well. I have messed with an Alley and Gip album in the past. They did have some kind of cuts on there, but this was not a good example of that. And like the Whip Yo Ass song by Dub C and Nelly was kind of another poor one also. This one just kind of had like this comical kind of whip sound effect on there, and this the beat was trying to be like kind of a crunk type song and just kind of like a club type song, but just kind of had kind of flat and flaccid kind of energy that just really was kind of off-putting as far as that kind of went. It just, I mean, this album does kind of lack club songs. It doesn't really have so much of like the vibe of stepping out and kind of weekend vibes. The closest song I would say that comes to that would just be like the Lil Wayne song Shorty Bounce. But I just kind of feel like as far as that's kind of concerned, most of this album is not really much of a weekend album. It's kind of, I mean, there are sports game songs and kind of some of that Southern Fried energy, like songs like Talking That Talk and some of those type ones. But for the most part, it doesn't really have like full blown nightclub just flashiness stepping out. Maybe it was trying to fit the theme of the movie where most of the movie takes place in a prison center, but it's just kind of the concept that it probably could have used a weekend kind of club cut where there are sports gems, but there's not full blown club cuts as far as that kind of goes. But I would have to say that Whip Yo Ass just was kind of a flaccid kind of song. That's just kind of the thing. But me liking 8 songs out of 13, I'm gonna go ahead and give this album. Me liking 8 songs out of 13, I'm gonna go ahead and give this album like a 7.5 out of 10. I feel like that's pretty good. I could probably give it a 7.75, but there still are 5 songs I didn't enjoy, and I feel like the second single just didn't quite do the damage that it needed to. And it's not like it was this album's fault, but I just question why Fly Away didn't do better. Those are 2 great songs. They both were Nelly songs. I mean, maybe it's just the fact that Nelly was kind of being oversaturated at the time, but I kind of feel like this was a good example of prime Nelly that probably should have been seen further, but it just didn't happen to really do that. But I do feel like the singles are definitely there. The quality of the singles are there. There are some flagship artists: Akon, T.I., Lil Wayne, D12, Chameleonaire, David Banner, Murphy Lee, some of those type folks. They really deliver, and they have like these secret cache of songs that are pretty much damn near like they just feel like individual singles and spare songs from each of these artists. Like Bounce Like This feels like an Urban Legend extra cut. Shorty Bounce by Lil Wayne kind of feels like an extra The Carter 1 cut. Murphy Lee just kind of dropped a secret song when he has kind of taken some time off, and Akon So Fly feels like an extra kind of new reimagining of like Locked Up that he dropped in 2004. Same type vibe. So it's just kind of the concept about that. But I give it a 7.5 just because I feel like this album I feel like there's a whelming amount of songs on this album. But like most movie soundtracks, there are some songs by some lesser known artists that just don't deliver as much. And some of these songs, like I do feel like this is kind of a good album in the sense of like sports game mentalities and like some Southern Fried flashiness, but there's just not really in terms of like a sheer weekend kind of highlight and that type of stuff. I mean, the energy is definitely there for some raucous kind of energy, but maybe it could have used just like some weekend type music. And the ladies songs are not in overabundance either. I mean, it's supposed to be more of like a testosterone fueled kind of album, but it just doesn't come off as like very much like a smoke and drink kind of album. It's just kind of kept in a more kind of almost, I don't want to say family friendly, but just more parental kind, or just more kind of healthier kind of mindset than I was thinking it would have been. It's just kind of more kind of PG-13, just kind of like where the edge is just somewhat watered down, not wholesomely enough to notice. There still is profanity and foul language on here, but just kind of the concept where it just is not the sheer craziness. There's not really like full blown, like I think the craziest song on this album is probably Talking That Talk with Chameleonaire, and maybe Shoddy Bounce by Lil Wayne has some gun edge on there. But in terms of like the regular energy, there's just not like, get crunk, get laid type songs on here as far as that kind of goes. But it's just kind of, it just has like a pretty good variation, but I feel like it just doesn't quite cut loose as much as I would like it to. So it gets a 7.5 out of 10. The social score as a result, I'll give like a 7 out of 10 because it does have 2 singles. Earth Time is like the hit single that probably attracted like the most attention. It does have T.I., Lil Wayne song, Akon song, some of that type of stuff, D12 and Eminem type song. But I kind of feel like I was saying, I mean, this album is just not an overall kind of crazy weekend highlight. I mean, the 2 hit songs that have the most social potential are just the Nelly and Murphy Lee songs, and both of them just kind of have like this kind of quick, kind of brief, kind of sports game kind of energy, but the whole album just does not wholesomely kind of convey that. I mean, there are some other ones. This album does have more than 4 or 5 or 6 hit songs on here, but they just kind of have different energies that just don't make for like a true social, enamored, kind of full blown weekend juggernaut as much as it could be. So this kind of thing is good, but it just is not a social juggernaut. This kind of happens to be a thing, but it does have some raucous energy. The Chameleonaire song is good. Lil Wayne song, some of these, the Nelly and Murphy Lee, but it's just it's kind of sporadic. This kind of happens to be a thing. But in terms of the future, like that's difficult just because this was just a movie and this is just kind of a one-shot movie, didn't get any sequels. But I do recommend checking this out. It does have some hits on here. It's worth looking into. Like I said, the most recent D12 of the full roster song, good Secret T.I. Lil Wayne song, good Secret Akon song, some stuff like that. Chameleonaire, David Banner. So it just has some hits on here. But yeah, so that's this kind of thing.